could see 6 figures on my checking account. The company goes public. I might have yelled like, I'm rich. 2 weeks after that, something wasn't working in our apartment. The silliest and the stupidest thing. And then suddenly I feel this sort of panic attack. I should be happy. I'm not. What the heck is going on?
Sami, I am so excited for this. I cannot believe it has been 7 years since we last did this, but thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, Harry, thanks for having me back. Time flies when you're having fun, right? 7 years.
I mean, it totally does. You look freaking younger. I look older significantly, but I want to start with a little bit of backstory because I think so much actually goes back to childhood. You know, I always remember my father and like my family kind of instilling this, you'll be good enough when you live in a certain place. It was Chelsea for us in London. I'm just intrigued. Take me to your childhood. Where did you live? And how was that relationship with your parents?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Finland, about 200 miles northeast of Helsinki, very close to the wonderful border with Russia. And so I grew up on a farm, and it was a gentleman's farm, I guess I could say, in that my parents were factory workers. So we had a farm. Lots of manual labor. I was their manual labor. So very kind of humble beginnings, picking potatoes, feeding chickens. And so that's kind of how I was growing up. And I would say 2 things about my upbringing. In some ways, it was very kind of romantic in that, you know, growing up on a farm, I could climb the trees and it was very safe. And like, it was a wonderful, wonderful, place to live. I would say that that's sort of the one thing. But the second thing I would say, I absolutely had no professional role models. And the fact that I'm living in America today, you know, building a company, and I have been here in the States for more than 20 years. For my mom, it's still like, you know, I'm living in the moon or in the Mars. So it's a very, very kind of unlikely sequence of events. So my parents didn't even go to high school. They weren't professionally trained. So I had absolutely no role models of what might be possible beyond being a factory worker and, you know, picking potatoes to feed the family.
What was it that opened your eyes to the world? Where did you get this sense of ambition and this desire to conquer more of the world than the farm in Finland?
Well, first I should say I've come to realize that I have a story. We all have a story. So the truth is I don't know. I absolutely don't know. But obviously I have a story and a narrative behind that I think might be true. And so the story that I have is, you know, obviously I was reading a lot of magazines, computer magazines. I think even in Finland, you know, we had Fast Company and so forth. I could see that there's a larger, bigger world out there. And I get very excited about computers through the pages of magazines. And I somehow convinced my parents to find the money to buy a Commodore 64. Some of your listeners might be old enough to know that there was a computer called Commodore 64. So I actually got a computer before I turned 10. And that kind of opened my eyes to what might be possible with this magical tool called a computer, which obviously my parents had no idea about. And I, just as an anecdote, I was so drawn into the screen and the computer and what was possible with it, whether that was programming or simple games, that of course my parents were always telling me, come back and come help us with the fun work, because nothing's gonna ever come out of that. Like, you're so addicted to that computer, which obviously it's been a fun line to drop to my mom and my parents, you know, decades later, that nothing's going to come out of that. Well, my whole life and career has been built around that. But somehow I was exposed to this sort of world of computers. This was late 1980s. So computer wasn't the thing that people were talking about, you know, in the farmlands of Finland.
Can I ask you a question? Did you kind of know that you didn't have much money when you were growing up? Was that obvious to you in terms of kids at school having more, you not having much? Was that obvious?
No, it wasn't. And then the reason is, well, I'll tell you 2 things. The reason is in Finland, more or less everyone's middle class. So that's kind of one thing. So you're not exposed to, at least at the time, and we didn't have Instagram at the time. So you're not exposed to the extremes. And what you see on TV and movies, the Hollywood, it's not the real world, at least at the time. So you aren't really, at least at the time, you weren't exposed to the extremes. I always felt comfortable. I had what I wanted. I had what I needed. So a couple of tools for sports, whether it's cross-country skiing or running, you need sneakers. So I never felt like we were somehow missing out, surprisingly so. That said, I have to say, the reason we had a farm was to subsidize our own food, so we wouldn't need to spend all the money at grocery stores. I also remember we never had a new car. We saved a lot of money for many years to be able to buy a used car. We did one vacation trip with an airplane, but we couldn't afford to travel as a family. So it was me and my dad one year, and then my mom and my sister the following year. And so obviously in today's context, this idea that you can't afford to fly all four, that you can have half the family this year and half the family next year, that sounds pretty poor, doesn't it? But that's kind of how I was growing up. But I never felt like it was extraordinarily poor or suffering.
When did money start to become important to you?
I don't know if you believe my answer, but in some ways, never. I've always felt I've had enough at any given time because I've been pretty happy with very little. That said, ever since I was a kid, I've dreamed of what could be. But that what could be has never been about, I wish I had $5,000 or $50,000 or $500,000. But I've always dreamed of what could be in terms of living in a bigger circles, creating something for others. So I've always dreamed of like this life on a farm, picking potatoes, having a job 9 to 5, getting drunk on a Friday evening, having hangover on a Saturday, going back to your factory work on a Monday morning. This cannot be all there is to life. So I've certainly had that dreaming always going on as part of my operating system.
When you dreamed of what could be, what was that dream? Was it the how? I'm just trying to understand, like, was it a desire to be with powerful people? Was it a desire to be in a big house? Was it a desire to have a beautiful wife? What was the dream?
No, honestly, none of those. The dream has always been about like creating something that attracts a lot of use or value for others. And I'll give you the one example that I did. So when I was 15 or 16, I opened up and kind of hacked together one of the first BBSs, so bulletin board systems in Finland. So, obviously I was running that from my room. I hijacked my parents' phone line and then upgraded eventually to a 24-hour phone line, BBS, so bulletin board system. So you have modems and, this is sort of the pre-internet people calling. So that was an example of a project, a dream that I wanted to build. I wanted to build something useful that many other people would use, and I charged some users for access, and that gave me a ton of satisfaction. Like, hey, I'm creating something. I can't explain where that satisfaction was coming from, but it wasn't just, somebody paid for it. It was the act of creating something that other people want and other people use. That's been a big part of the dreaming what could be. And honestly, now 20 plus years later, I can, and we can talk about like what I'm working on now and the company I started before Virta, and some of the same drivers are still at the core of it.
Do you have a fundamental need to be liked? I'm sure, is that part of it, which is creating products that people love, and then it's like, I want to be liked?
I think there's an element of that, but I would say, I think if I go to my core, you asked earlier, like upbringing, it was humble, wonderful beginnings, but feeling of I'm worthy the moment I wake up definitely was not there. So I'm a very, very unnecessarily hard on myself. And I think one of the programming that I have, whether that's nature or nurture, is I have to earn the right to exist through my actions every day. And there's a lot of that kind of drive that's inside of me. Less so I want to be validated by others, but this kind of feeling of the fact that I exist as a human being, which should be enough. And honestly, it is enough. I can intellectually tell.
Is that why you do the sport? Like you are an intense athlete and you do unbelievably hard things. Is that a desire to tell yourself that you're worthy? Like, I can do this.
I think less so. So there's a couple of things that I allocate my life time, and one of those is sports and physical activities. And the reason I do all that, and the race triathlons and cycling, and rode a boat from California to Hawaii with my wife, rowboat, and we can talk about those. At least the narrative that I have, it's a couple of things. First one is I want to experience the animal self, if that makes any sense. Breathing, sweating, the taste of blood in my mouth, and heart beating. At some level, like in my bone marrow, that's a beautiful, beautiful feeling. And I sometimes jokingly tell people, I say, if you only have your body to transport your brain from one Zoom meeting to another, that is a very, very poor existence. Like the fact that we have our bodies and we are able-bodied, I want to use that, like that feeling of using my entire body, suffering, sweating, heart beating. It is a beautiful thing to have, and I want to make most out of it. So that's one reason I do a lot of sports. And it is a very visceral, kind of a bone marrow level feeling that I have. And then the second reason is, honestly, it is very addictive and just fundamentally makes me feel, both in my body and in my mind, very good. And it allows me to be way more focused when I just have to sit down and only use my brain. So definitely it's part of my wiring that it allows me to do the intellectual things when I also train my body.
Do you think, I think not all, but I think 95% of great founders are addicts. And there's many different addicts. Agree?
Oh, 100%. And I often tell my wife, I'm so happy. I'm happily married. And I'm so glad I haven't gone down the path of very dangerous addictions actually ever in my life. But in almost anything I do, if one is good, I'll go for 5 and then I go for 10, and I have to really observe my own behavior and make sure that I don't go too far in anything. 100%.
How do you do that? Like, honestly, I haven't navigated that balance. I think a lot of people followed my running when I started running a lot, and I went to running 2 or 3 times a week, a marathon. So 2 or 3 marathons a week. Sami, my fucking knees are shot. I can't run at all anymore. I'm so fucked. I didn't listen. And how do you know where that line is?
I think the ability to observe yourself is an absolute superpower, which I personally have developed over years now, I'd say decades, through meditation. I guess the analogy I've sometimes used is, you in a computer software. So, like you write code, you can have sort of runtime debugging mode. You can see the code line by line, and you can kind of find where it gets stuck. That's kind of, if you can observe your own thoughts or your own behavior, take like a step back and see what's happening. I think that's a kind of a superpower. And I am not trying to pretend I'm like excellent at it. I am a beginner, but I think cultivating the ability to observe your own thoughts and behavior is absolutely essential in kind of catching you and yourself and your behaviors, and hopefully catch it before it goes too far. So that's one way in which I try to do that. And I'll just give you practical, somewhat silly examples. Like, what am I addicted to? So certainly in sports, like I try to be aware of why I'm doing it. You know, I have a training log. I keep track of how much should I do. I try to be aware of when I'm getting too close, overreaching or overtraining, or I may be getting sick. So that's one example. Caffeine intake. People ask me, do you drink coffee? You're the kind of person, you probably don't drink coffee. I'm like, absolutely I do drink. And, you know, my wife, you know, it's just kind of makes jokes and laughs at me, says, yeah, you go from 1 cup to 2, then you go to 3, you go to 4. And I'm absolutely the kind of person who could end up with 17 espressos a day. And so I have to catch myself in that action. Work is no different. Like, you could kind of absolutely pull me in. Like anything and everything, absolutely, I have that sort of addictive streak. And therefore, like, I have many reasons to stay away from recreational drugs. And I'm absolutely certain that I could end up in a ditch very easily.
Can you take me to an time when you observed something really unhealthy and what you learned or did from it when you went, oh, no, that's not good?
There are many moments when, you know, I'm just, despite being, you know, grown in Finland and kind of an Iceman and calm, cool, collected, there are moments where you are just about to lose it, whether you're tired or someone's screaming or whatnot. It's almost like anger management, just being able to catch the wave of emotions coming up, and you're about to be like, seriously, whether that's yelling or screaming or whatever, if you can catch you in the before you act. Like, I have daily moments like that, whether that's with kids or spouse. You're about to say something and you realize, do I want to preserve this relationship, or do I try to be right, or do I try to satisfy my own urge to be right or feel better?
When did you first make your real money? Like, when was the first big hit of money for you?
We sold a little bit secondary in kind of 6 figures, with my company Trulia before it went public. Maybe that was, let's just say 2010, 2009, 2008 or something like that. So we sold 6 figures in US dollars of secondary. And that's actually the only single moment in my life where I felt or experienced this surge of, oh my God, there's more money than I may ever need, which sounds funny to say. You can spend all the money in the world. Or there's more money than I ever thought I would make in my life. That is the one and only moment when I've experienced that.
Did you feel happy in that moment?
Yeah, I would say that's the only time I felt like, oh my God, I might have yelled, like, I'm rich. Like, I could see 6-figure sum of cash on my checking account, and you know, I'm going to share something really ridiculous. So I felt like I have a lot of money. I went to Best Buy in San Francisco. Like, wow, I can buy anything, and I probably spent $15,000 buying a Bose, you know, a movie audio set, bunch of iPods for music, just electronics, $15,000-$20,000. Took them to my house. I spent another 10 grand on a bicycle for triathlon time trial bike. That's all I needed. I probably spent $25,000, and I paid all my debt. Like, I had like $100,000 of debt coming out of Stanford. I paid all that. It probably lasted 48 hours. That feeling of, oh my God, I have so much money. I don't know what to do. I can satisfy all my monetary needs and desires. And it was a 24 hours to 48 hours. And I can honestly say since then, I've more or less never thought about money. But it was an interesting experience because leading into that, I knew that we were selling some secondary. I'm like, wow, I'm going to make a bunch of money. I was dreaming about buying a car even. I did not end up buying a car. So it was a 48-hour wave that kind of washed this idea that money is going to give some eternal joy and happiness. And then I got it, and $25,000 at Best Buy, and I realized that it was just like any dopamine hit. It's like a espresso, and that is not going to give you an eternal joy and satisfaction.
They must have loved you at Best Buy, but I'm intrigued. When you go public with Trulia, you make a ton more money. How did that feel? Because that's a feeling that founders, we have 700,000 founders that listen to the show. That is a feeling that they dream of. We're not allowed to say that it's about the money today, but for a good chunk it is, and there's nothing wrong with that, I don't think. For those that listen and have that moment of IPO and when you are technically liquid, how did that feel for you?
Yeah, so Trulia went public on New York Stock Exchange 2012, and I had left my operational role a few months before that, so I was still on the board. So I did not have a full-time job, so I was kind of a free agent by choice and by design. I was living in New York, in Chelsea with my wife. We had no kids, and the company goes public, and yeah, there was some secondary sale as part of that. So sort of objectively speaking, there was some very liquid wealth created in that, instant moment. The 2 weeks after that in my life were probably the worst that I've ever had in my life. And so here's what happened. I remember it was one Tuesday or Thursday, random day in the middle of the week. I'm walking to Chelsea Piers to do my morning workout at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I remember something wasn't working in our apartment, whether it's the washing machine or something. Something was just broken and was sort of annoying me. And I'm walking to Chelsea Piers on Manhattan. And that feeling of that thing's not working was creating anxiety. And I was just feeling very just disappointed about it. And then suddenly I feel this sort of panic attack is about to come over. I'm like, wait a second. I have a wonderful wife. I'm in my 30s. I have a ton of money in the bank. I'm living in New York. I can do whatever I want. This should be the peak, the ultimate peak moment in human joy and satisfaction. And here I am. I'm getting anxious, disappointed, aggravated about some silly thing not working. And my mind goes, wait a second, I'm in my 30s. I may have 60 years or more of this left. This is not going to end well. What the heck is going on? I should be happy. I'm not, and I'm getting anxious about the silliest and the stupidest thing. And I was about to freak out. I got very, very worried about what is happening. So that was probably one of the single lowest moment I've experienced in my life. And I'll just quickly mention, and we can go into what I did afterward. But I realized pretty soon after, a few days later, that I've never, up to that point in my life, I had always kind of chased the next carrot in front of my nose. Not money, but some exciting thing or project. I was always busy chasing the next thing. And I had never, ever stopped and being alone with my thoughts, with my mind. I was always busy doing the next thing, and I had never kind of stopped, quote unquote, being alone with my thoughts when there's nothing to do and everything should be perfect. Everything wasn't perfect. And I realized that I've trained my mind through education with knowledge. I've trained my body as an athlete, but I had never gotten to know my own mind. And it was a freakiest moment to realize, like, holy shit, there's a whole thing happening. I've never been aware of what's happening, how it's working, because I've been busy doing the next thing. And so the answer to your question, that moment of the company going public, I can do anything in my life, actually was the lowest point in my life. Like, absolutely, completely lowest point in my life.
Do you think it's because you were suddenly directionless for the first time? There was no next carrot. You find you had all these nice things, a nice apartment, a wonderful wife, fit, but what now?
Well, I will say, I'm glad I was married. I'm glad I had a wonderful wife and spouse whom I'm still married to. Because if I was single, living in New York, suddenly a lot of money, suddenly a lot of time, and I'm feeling kind of rudderless and anxious, that would have been an optimal moment to go down the wrong path, wrong addictions, and believe that, oh, I'm just missing something which you can maybe be able to find from Vegas. I'm so glad I did not go down that path. We decided to go, as in me and my wife, we decided to go to a 10-day silent meditation retreat in Taiwan soon after, to address this weakness. So to answer your question, and I've been a meditator ever since, so that's more than a decade ago. I had never been aware of how the mind works and what's happening there. And if the mind is running you're going to be in trouble. And you can kind of fool yourself by basically pretending like the next thing pretending that the next thing in front of your nose is the thing you have to do. But if you've never actually truly stopped and see what's happening in your mind, you are just kind of a train wreck waiting to happen. And I had never had that moment where I would truly stop and say, hey, now I can do anything.
Was that very scary for you?
Absolutely. Like literally, I was on the verge of, I don't think I've ever had a real panic attack, but I could feel it, just panic coming over me. Why is this happening? I should be just happy here and like levitating in air.
It's hard to stare at the demons, so to speak. Can I ask you, it's even harder to talk about them. And I think that's a big challenge. But we're so ingrained that vulnerability is great and vulnerability is great. And if you feel it, you should say it. And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts on vulnerability versus authenticity and how you think about what they are and when the right time is.
I feel very strongly that authenticity is something to aspire towards 100% of the time. And sometimes it's hard. And what do I mean by that? I try to be more or less the same person, as a spouse, as a friend, as a dad, as a CEO, as a founder, whatever, a professional. I try to be the same person. I think that's what I aspire to be. And I think that's probably a wonderful way of living your life. It's also very liberating because like, this is who I am and this is kind of what I do. I'm not faking or trying to play a role or put a mask on or 15 masks on. So authenticity, I think 100% time, 100% authentic. I think that's right. However, vulnerability is a little different beast. But do you have a question you were jumping?
Yeah, well, it's just like, did you ever feel like you were putting a mask on? Often
100%.
CEOs. When was that, and what mask were you putting on?
I think even coming to America, in my 20s and being very insecure, I went to Stanford for my second grad school, and starting from there, you come from the potato fields of Finland, and you just like everything. You're like, oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to swim. I'm gonna sink here. So you're very insecure and just try to hide your vulnerabilities, and so it's just insecurity, and then always trying to think like, how do I behave here to appear as competent and confident as possible? Which is very draining. It's extremely draining. It's horrible. So I think that's an example of not being truly authentic. But then the other part of your question was vulnerability. I think it is also a superpower to be able to be vulnerable. Being 100% vulnerable in 100% situations, I think that's a recipe for disaster. Like that's absolutely a recipe for disaster. Starting from, depending on what kind of bear you meet on a trail, sometimes you have to act big, loud, and noise and pretend that they run away. And for a certain type of a bear, you really just want to go down and pretend like, you're dead. And that's how you save your body. So anyway, that's kind of a silly example. But it's the same thing in interacting with humans. And so one example, I'm a CEO, founder of a company, 500 employees, I run it. I try to be 100% authentic 100% of the time. And I also am vulnerable, but I don't want to be 100% vulnerable 100% of the time. Practical example. The team will feed off of your energy. So I don't think you want to be in front of your team and be sharing about all the issues you may have with your kids or with your friends or with your spouse or even all your fears, because the team will sort of feed off of your energy. So there are times when you want to be optimistic. Maybe there are times you want to be overly optimistic. I still believe in authenticity and transparency and grounding in reality. But I do think that it is not optimal to be 100% vulnerable 100% of the time.
Okay, so question for you are they not conflicting? And what I mean by that is, say you're having a really hard time in the stage of the business and it's really hard, and then you get up or you come into work and putting on the brave face and saying, we're great, all good, whatever. It's not authentic. Or you're having a really hard time with your wife or your kids or whatever. You're struggling. Is it not inauthentic to then not be transparent?
Well, it's kind of the same thing as our brain is just it's just sort of a random generator machine. And this idea of say, I'm going to never lie, therefore I should be saying everything that comes to my mind. That's a stupidity. Like, our brain is going to generate, if you walk on the street and you see people, your brain's generating, judging people and their looks and this and that. To be honest and authentic doesn't mean you say everything that comes to your mind. So I don't think that's kind of how I think about it. We have prefrontal cortex. We can decide most of the time, some of the time, what comes out of our mouth. So I don't think it's being inauthentic. And then this one, I'll give you an example, like vulnerability. Like, I have cried countless times in front of my team as a CEO. That to me is vulnerability. And there are moments when, we treat people with diabetes, we reverse their disease, we save their lives, and they're heartbreaking and amazing stories that we hear from our patients. Sometimes I hear those stories and it just literally makes me cry from sort of joy and happiness and gratitude. And, obviously there's situations where you kind of want to hold back, and sometimes you just cry. So that's one example. I've cried in front of my team.
Can you take me to a time when you've been too vulnerable and you reflect on it and you go, that was too vulnerable of me?
Honestly, I don't think that's been my problem. It's been the opposite. And I'll give credit to my wife, because I suddenly, grew up in Finland and kind of an Iceman. And so she has melted my heart to the extent that I can even feel my own emotions and feelings. So I think my issue historically has been to not feel anything, meaning I haven't been sufficiently in touch with my own feelings and emotions. So I think my problem has been that I haven't been sufficiently vulnerable. I've invested a lot of energy to not be vulnerable. So I can't even think of where I've been too vulnerable. So I think I still have room to be more vulnerable is my take.
Can I ask, does your wife work? You are a incredible CEO. You're also a very dedicated athlete, and you have kids. Does she work, or does she look after the kids full time? Yes
and no. And so I'll just give you, so I co-founded Virta 2014. We had no kids. We got our first daughter 2015, so the first year of the startup. Second one 2017. And my wife was one of the very, very first employees for the first 6 years of the company life. So we had 2 children, 2 working parents, working in the same company that was started from 0 to 6 years and 0 to, 300 employees. And for the last 2 years, she has not worked full time.
Was that okay working together?
It's very high beta. So amplitude is very high. It's beautiful and wonderful when you're both excited about the mission and the course, and you can spend the weekends being creative, talk about ideas. And so that's the sort of positive high beta. It's absolutely amazing. Then you have the negative high amplitude, high beta. When things aren't going well, the company scales, you have your spouse, you have sort of interpersonal issues. So my recommendation to everyone is It's very high beta. I would probably advise against, because then you have too many eggs in the same basket. And if things go sideways, you can destroy your most important personal relationship in a process. So the cost of that, I would argue, is way too much for the joys and ups that you can have while creating something together. And one of the reasons, I can't speak on behalf of my spouse, but one of the reasons she decided that, okay, time is up, 6 years was great, was I think the risks of damaging our relationship were just increasing.
She just got fed up with you, Sami. She thought, fuck, 24 hours with this guy? God, it's too much. Can I ask you, did it enable you to be a better operator when she became a full-time parent, because it meant that you were enabled in a way that you weren't before?
She is absolutely amazing, but I think she would admit that we outsourced too much of childcare during those first 6 years of the life of our kids. So it did not fundamentally change how I've operated as a CEO, but our kids probably took the short end of the stick for 6 years.
Do you regret that?
It is what it is. They're wonderful kids. I just did a one-on-one trip with the 8-year-old to my native Finland over the holiday weekend, and I try to do my best, but I'll be more honest. I think we both feel that, having nannies raise your kids is not optimal.
I get you, but I'm also going to be kind to you. You are running a 300-person plus company at the time. What do you want? You can't have everything. And so what would you have done differently with the benefit of hindsight? Not be as ambitious and not be such a good operator, but be there for the kids?
Yeah, it's tough to say. But I will say that if you have an amazing spouse and one of them has a more flexible schedule, it's probably very helpful for the kids and for the relationship. We're both kind of 6.5 days a week all in with a bunch of travel, and it's a lot. It's a lot.
Can I ask you, you've spoken a lot about your wife and the role that she's played. What are the secrets to a great marriage in your mind, having had such a great relationship that's been such a support to you for many years?
You test your spouse by rowing across the Pacific Ocean and see if you both survive and you still want to be married after that.
Why did you do this? And just talk to me about it. Like, what did you learn about each other from rowing across the Pacific Ocean together?
Yeah.
It's not normal, Sami.
Just for context. So in summer 2014, from Monterey, California, we hopped into a rowboat, 20-foot roughly rowboat, unsupported, rowed across the Pacific Ocean, 2,700 nautical miles to Hawaii, 45 days, 3 hours with your spouse. All the time, your bathroom is a bucket, and then you throw it, overboard. So that was kind of the context. Very, very briefly, the reasoning for the adventure is part of it was just an adventure, but the cause that we were rowing for was raising awareness around dangers of poor nutrition and particularly sugar. So that was kind of the cause, why we did it. But in terms of learnings with your spouse, honestly, it was so many things happened. It's just like absolutely life transforming in many ways. I'll just mention a few things. I'll start with the biggest one. So we had no children going in. We are 7 days into the row. We're rowing 18 hours a day, basically nonstop, trying to sleep 5 hours or so a day. We're 7 days into the row. And I tell my wife, I said, hey, wow, this is an amazing experience, but I'd be wondering, what is there truly to human experience? What is there truly to life? I honestly think there's nothing bigger and better than having a family, having children. I feel like we should have a family. She looks at me and says, I can't believe I've been thinking about the exact same thing for the last 24 hours. And we got married with this mutual understanding that maybe kids, maybe not, but life's too good at least at the time, to mess it up with children. So that was one thing. Like literally within a 24-hour window, this feeling of, as a human, what is there to do? Do you want to have your name on the side of the hospital? Do you want to build 3 companies, sponsor product, whatever you want to do? Be this, write a book. Like, it just hit me. All those stuff, fine and good if you enjoy the process of creating those, but it is so shallow. Having children is the greatest thing. So that was one thing. We came out off the boat. In fact, we tried on the boat, but let's leave the details aside. We came off the boat. That was
going to be my question. Can you shag on a rowing boat?
You can, but it's not very hot. Let's put it this way. First child was born just about 9 months after we landed in Hawaii. Just about 9 months. The second thing is probably the sweetest moment in my life ever has been hopping off the boat on Waikiki Beach and giving a hug to my wife after 45 days and 3 hours of rowing. And knowing that there's only one person in the world who knows exactly what we went through, the pain, the suffering, the fears, and that's my wife. There's only one person in the world who knows exactly what we went through. She went through it, and knowing she could get through that feeling and trust, that it was just pure sweetness to give her a hug and know that if we can get through that and we have that shared experience, you need quite an obstacle that 2 of us will crack and fall apart in the following decades. And so that was the second thing. It was just like, holy shit, this is an amazing experience we have, and we both get through it. We've seen each other tired, stressed, anxious, about to fall apart, fearful, and we could just kind of come together and overcome all those obstacles.
What was the biggest argument you had on the trip? 45 days, that is a long time. You only see each other. What was the biggest argument? So
this is kind of an argument, but so one of the things you have is a lot of time, and you have a captive audience. You can't escape. You can't be like, come on, I'm angry, I'm gonna walk that way, you walk that way, and let's talk about this in a week. No, you're both captive audience. So we had a lot of time to fill the airwaves and come up with ideas. We talked about how do you come up with peace in Middle East? What would you do if you were president of this and that country? All kinds of topics. And then one of the topics my lovely wife threw at me said, you know what? If you didn't marry me, which one of our friends would you marry?
Oh no, Sami, don't answer that question.
As an engineer and a person driven by task completion, I was like, wonderful. That's a great question. Let me think and analyze these.
Sarah. I've always fancied Sarah.
And so I stepped into the mine, and I took the bite, and that was probably. There was lots of material for the conversations that followed on subsequent days, and mostly my wife was upset that I chose the person that she had a way better recommendation. But anyways, that was the biggest argument.
Can I ask, was it hard to lose romanticism from it? Was that challenging to lose the just slight element of mysteriousness?
Going back to authenticity and vulnerability, there's something, when you live through experiences like that, there's just something that brings you closer with the other person. Masks go away. It's like literally and figuratively. Masks go away. It's like, this is the raw essence of the person. And so I think in the end, those types of experiences are actually more positive than negative.
Did you have moments when you thought, I can't do this? I cannot do this?
Yeah, my wife pulled me out of it, actually. Credit to her.
Can you take me to one of them? What happened and why did you get in that mindset?
It is interesting. First 10 days was incredibly stormy. We were scared to death to flip the boat, and cold, and Pacific Ocean, by the way, it's not dolphins and rainbows and sunshine. It's very cold, windy, stormy. So it was very stormy, windy, cold. And then also the wind was pushing so hard that despite our best efforts, while we were making about 40 miles a day, we were making like 1 mile a day towards the right direction and 40 miles to south. So we left like Northern California, so towards Mexico. So anyways, about a week of that, in my engineering mind, I was doing the math. I'm like, we've done 1 mile a day and we have to get about 2,000 miles west. So that means 2,000 days. So, that's 6 to 7 years. Like this is not going to be happening. There's 6 to 7 years. We had packed food for 100 days. And I'm like, I kind of lost the belief that this is possible. And I started unraveling. I remember little things like brushing my teeth every day. I was like, I'm not going to brush my teeth. Psychologically, I started to sort of unravel. I'm like, this math doesn't add up. It's just not happening. And my wife was encouraging, saying, well, we'll just keep grinding it. It's like, if it's a mile a day towards the right direction, it's a mile a day. If it's 2 miles, it's 2 miles. If I was alone, I probably would have quit at that point. We just kept going. Then we got lucky that the winds calmed down and we started to make, 60 miles a day progress towards the right direction. But I probably would have given up had it been just me.
I had my challenges and my fair share in the time that we last did this show, over the last 7 years. And when things are really shit and really hard and I can't see a way out, I actually think of David Goggins, who says one thing, which is like, in those times, I ask myself one question, which is, can you take one more step?
Well, I will mention there, it's, oftentimes when I speak with other entrepreneurs and I say startups and companies, founder-driven startups companies, only fail when founders stop trying. Startups only fail when founders stop trying. And I think that's 100% true. But obviously, there is a point when stubbornness goes too far and you're literally wasting your lifetime and you're literally just not going to go anywhere. But to know when you're at that point, but to know that there's no formula, it's very idiosyncratic. And that is the challenge oftentimes for people who have grit, people who have perseverance, for founders. Like, you cannot give up, but sometimes you have to give up. I don't think there's formula, but that sort of art and science oftentimes in a lot of, like, you need grit, you need perseverance. We have a word sisu in Finnish. Like, you just don't give up. You just persevere.
But that's not enough, sadly. But markets can kill you. Shit GTM can kill you. Lack of funding can kill you. There are many things other than a founder giving up that kills you, I've learned. Now, there's a question of, if you invest in great founders, they find the market, they find the product, which I don't agree with either. There's great founders who fuck up for several years doing something that they shouldn't do.
Yeah, no, I cannot disagree with that. But the basic premise still is that as long as you're breathing, the company has money, so it's not defaulting or in bankruptcy, there's always hope, as long as you keep going. So anyways, it's a philosophical thing where, like, you should never give up, but there's obviously a point in time where you're literally just wasting your time, or you're cutting trees in the wrong forest. But to know that objectively is very, very hard, because you always have these stories. Oh, we were building a gaming company and then it turned into a Slack. You always have these stories where, Elon, like, all the chips on the table, like, I'm kind of reverse mortgaging my house and Friendsgiving, and you got these stories, these anomalies. But obviously those could be very detrimental decisions in another context.
Have you ever felt like, I just don't want to do this anymore? Like, actually, I don't have the passion anymore for it.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples. So yes, is the answer. I think Trulia is basically an easy example to start briefly. So when we were in the process of going public, I realized that it started to feel like a job, and I could not feel a deeper connection to the course of the mission. In fact, I wasn't even sure what was the mission of the company, because we had not really set the mission as founders. And I felt like the reasons for starting, which was, let's build something in Silicon Valley, and if we get investors and millions, how cool would it be as an immigrant to build a product, build a business, get investors, make it successful. And we kind of had done that. We had 1,000+ employees, whatever, 100 million+ revenues, and tens of millions of people using it. Companies about to go public, and I'm like, we've done it. But it's like job now, and I literally just was not excited to do it anymore. And so I decided to step away from my operational role. And obviously, when the company goes public, you sign up for you get a whole new set of investors, and you sign up for the next decade. And I was like, I just cannot see it happening. And so that was one. And by the way, there was a lesson for myself, which I've really taken to heart with Virta Health, which is you better set a mission as a founder that motivates even you, and it's a clear North Star why you're doing it. And which isn't just like, oh, I'm excited today. That's a cool thing. So anyways, that's one example. Practically, I just lost it. And I just wanted to be very clear about it.
I like founders where they don't have a next chapter. Like, if you ask me what I'm doing next, I'm dead. Like, I don't mean that stupidly, but I want 20VC to be the ongoing vehicle for the rest of my life. We will have new shows, new funds, new people, but I am 20VC, and it is me. Do you think I'm wrong? And do you think I'll miss out on great founders if I have that approach?
No, I actually absolutely agree. And people sometimes ask me like, well, what do you think you're going to do next? Or what's your next? And truly, the honest answer is, that's ridiculous. That's like asking, who will you marry next? Who's the girlfriend you have on a hopper that you're going to marry next? And that's a ridiculous answer. I agree with you. This idea that, no, I have a list of 3, I'm just looking for someone to buy this, and then I'm going to do this. I personally, I would feel very dissatisfied with my life with that. So I don't know. I agree with you.
The question I have then is, people go, gosh, that's terribly unhealthy to tie so much of your identity up in your company.
So tying your identity to your company, it is a natural process. It happens to almost all founders. But you have to hedge against it. I feel very strongly about this. You have to hedge against it. And here's how I do it. And I'll explain why. I think you want to consciously cultivate different identities in your brain, whether that's being a parent. Like in my case, there's 3 things I allocate time. Being the CEO of Virta, trying to reverse diabetes globally. As a parent, spouse, kind of family person, friends, and then an athlete. So I have a very strong athlete identity in my mind. So I, race in cycling and mountain biking and stuff like that. So I consciously cultivate different identities that are kind of non-correlated with my founder identity. And I think it's very, very important for everyone. And here's why. There's actually a number of reasons. But when things are going up and to the right in your, say, company, it's sort of wonderful. Like, I am the company, I'm everything. But that never lasts forever. Never. And so if you don't have other identities, the moments when things really hit the wall, you're very likely to crumple and crack. And I'm knocking on wood here. I've been a founder, operator now 25 years. I haven't cracked. And I have too many friends who've completely cracked. Mentally, emotionally. And I don't know, maybe that happens to me tomorrow or tonight. Like, I don't know. It's not granted. But one way to protect against cracking is that you have multiple identities. And here's the second reason. You cultivate multiple identities, although fundamentally they are all stories, but the stories work. The identities. The second reason is it's easier to take risks, calculated risks, and taking risks as a growth company founder is absolutely critical to succeed. Almost like every couple of years, you need to bet the company on something to keep kind of winning and succeeding. And it's very easy as you grow and get further to become more risk averse. And I find that when you are sort of detached, appropriately detached, but passionate about your cause, it's easier to put everything on the line again. When you're like, well, this is not everything. And so I find that cultivating multiple identities is very, very healthy for every single founder. Because if you don't do that, it's very easy. You and your company, you are the thing. And that's all you have. And I think that's very dangerous.
Speaking of dangerous, I am just intrigued. You said there about kind of friends around you who've burnt out, who have really struggled and cracked. When you look at them, what are the commonalities amongst them that made them crack, do you think? And for founders listening, wanting to go, oh gosh, I don't want that to be me, what do you say to them?
I'm no doctor, I'm no psychologist, and I don't play one on the internet, so take this with a grain of salt. Rather than saying what are the commonalities in those, I'll share what I have done, what I think is important. And usually people are lacking those things, I think. So there's sort of 3 or 4 things that I very consciously invest time. One is foundation of health. Like I treat myself like an Olympic athlete, basically. And this mind and body, to me, it's just all biology. It's just one and the same thing. So this is a simple example. Like if you don't sleep enough, like, oh my God, everything unravels. Like you're so more likely to become depressed and crack and whatnot.
How much time do you sleep?
I track my sleep every day. I'd say I average between 7 and 8 hours for the course of a week. And sometimes there's, like last night, I think it was 6.1 hours. Sometimes there's crazy things happen. Travel is 4 hours. But like I try to get to the 7 to 8 average over the course of a week. Sometimes I even cancel morning meetings if I'm like too far and I need to like get 9 hours or something. So sleep. But anyways, that's one of the things. There's one area, foundation of health. And it's very easy to be 22 and like, oh, I'm hardcore. I'm just pulling all-nighters or whatever. And like, do not do that. So one is foundation of health. To be able to be a founder 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, like there's no way that's going to work, with all-nighters. And just to give you an example, if you're an Olympic athlete, you have Olympic Games tomorrow, you are not going to go party and pull an all-nighter the night before. That would be absolute stupidity. If you're CEO, you're a founder, you have to treat yourself like an Olympic athlete. So that's one, foundation of health. Second one is what I already mentioned. I think cultivating multiple identities is so critical. Absolutely critical. The third one is having a trusted group of people who's not your spouse, where you can let your short hair down and completely be vulnerable, authentic. To me, it's been the YPO, so Young Professionals Organization. I've been part of a forum since 2008, 16 years. We meet for 4 hours every month. In fact, I had my forum meeting yesterday. We talk about personal, family, business. So you have other CEOs who have no financial interest or anything in your company, not your VCs, not your board members. We can absolutely let your hair down, and that's where you can cry on others' shoulder and be absolutely 100% authentic and tell all the crap that's falling apart. Having that kind of a trusted group of people, particularly for men, I think it's harder, is an absolute key thing. You need trusted. And this isn't just a CEO buddy that you meet at a conference and you kind of like, how's it going? High five, awesome. No, it's like the raw shit that's going on in your life. You need that kind of a group.
Why do you think it's harder for men? I'm intrigued on that.
Well, I'm just quoting my lovely wife, who keeps telling me that we women, we have way more sort of trusted friendships where we openly share. So I'm taking that as a fact from her. I think, anyways, this is stereotypes, but I think men have more like casual friends where like we're good buddies, but don't necessarily go 4 layers deeper. And like, honestly, let me just tell you, like, I don't know, like I still cry because my dad never gave me whatever, a pat on the back or whatnot. So I don't know. I might be wrong, but I think on average, I think men have more buddies, but it's not that authentic and vulnerable necessarily, but having a group like a YPO forum is incredibly helpful.
Final one before we do a quick fire. I am intrigued. You mentioned a little bit that, you outsourced a lot parenting wise in the first 6 years. And now, your wife obviously is full time. I'm intrigued, just what does being a great father mean to you? And were you nervous being so on and so addictive mindset wise that you would not be able to be a great operator when you have this incredible responsibility of children?
I was not. And by the way, I read and I hear a lot about that. Well, I'm not going to be such a great CEO. Wait a second. You really have to take a step back and ask, what is there to life and what am I here optimizing? And I was so convinced that the greatest thing I can experience as a human is to be a parent after our role that I never questioned the fact that we want to have kids and how that's going to affect other parts of life. Like, I was so convinced that that is the right thing to do, and then everything else will fall into place around it. So I personally had no kind of, and obviously it changes, and people create stories like, well, because I'm a parent, I'm actually a better leader. It's like, maybe I am, maybe I'm worse. I don't care. It is very clear to me, I want to be a parent. I wanted to have kids. I'm very grateful I have 2 wonderful daughters. And whatever the implications of that are on my other parts of life, then be it. I can tell a story. I can do a beautiful story. I'm a better CEO because I have kids. Maybe I am. I might be. But I might be worse too. I don't know.
Did your marriage change post having kids?
Well, certainly on a practical level, you go from incredibly kind of selfish, hedonistic in some ways, like the world is your oyster. Oh, Friday evening, let's hop into plane and have 48 hours in there or whatever. That sort of spontaneity, practicality changes, but relationship-wise, let me take a step back. I would say, personally, I've been married now since, 14 years, or 13 years, soon 14. I think having joint projects, whether that's sort of self-development, self-discovery, children, having joint projects, not just completely independent, having joint projects is incredibly helpful in a marriage. And children can be one of those where you kind of together, you're learning and stumbling, and I think it's wonderful. It's actually very, very helpful. That's not the only joint project we've had. Obviously, we've had in a professional context and, some things sort of personal development. And I think it's wonderful to have joint projects where you're on a journey together. There is no destination. There's no arriving. It's like a lifelong journey. Is actually very helpful. Positive thing in a relationship.
Can I be really, really harsh? You have fun,
sure.
You have respect, you have honesty, and you have sex. Rank them 1 to 4. Fun, respect, honesty, sex. 4.
Wait. Rank them as in how important are they?
Yeah.
In a relationship with your spouse? All I remember is sex. So say them again. Honesty,
fun, respect, honesty, sex.
Actually, I think respect is probably the one. At least for me, being in a relationship with someone that I like truly, I respect this person. I'm learning from her. That carries a lot of things. And I'd say the other, I think the other 3 are equal right after. But I think the respect is the most important thing. I can't imagine being in a relationship with someone where I'm like, I don't know, like judging in my mind, like, wow, this person isn't smart enough or thoughtful enough, I'm not learning, or wow, if you have this visual feeling like, oh my God, like,
you can't do 1 and then 3.
Maybe the honesty is, it depends how you define it. Maybe that is the last one, like honesty in the sense that, you don't always say everything that comes to your mind. I would put fun Yeah, it's probably the second one. And one of the reasons I fell in love with my wife is first time we met, it's like Thursday afternoon, we come off the car about to go to our first date. She starts dancing on a parking lot in San Francisco at like whatever 6 p.m. on a Thursday. Just that, and for my Finnish kind of Iceman, I just look at it and I go, wait a second, life can be fun anytime, anywhere. And it was just incredible. I realized like, wow, the story that I believed in, that life is a grind and serious and hard, and wow, that is a very, very limited way of looking at the world and your life. So I'd put fun very high up there. And she has taught me so much about human experience and how amazing it can be, and not taking yourself too seriously, and choosing the games you play very carefully, and just making every moment fun. And then physical attraction is obviously it's very important, but it doesn't really carry you over decades, I would say, if that's the only thing or the number one thing.
I totally agree. I think you've maintained some very good brownie points with this interview, by the way. So I think you've done a great job. You're in good shape. Don't worry. Anyone listening to this will be like, good guy. Listen, I want to move into a quick fire round. So I say a short statement. You give me your immediate thoughts. We're going to start with a tough one, which is, what have you changed your mind on in the last 12 months?
I am even less convinced. In fact, I'm absolutely convinced that willpower doesn't exist. Free will doesn't exist. We have sort of a separate entity that makes decisions that is not tied into the deterministic world. I'm very convinced that is an illusion, and it's a very, very, very believable illusion in our minds. But it is an illusion. I'm become even more convinced that is the case, and it brings humility to realize that every human being is worthy, and however they behave, it gives you humility to just think about it's their wiring and the circumstances that affect their decisions. Not that there's a bad rider on the horse that somehow is inherently bad. So I think it gives me a lot of empathy and humility to think about, look at the world through that kind of lens, and other sentient beings walking around and how they behave, why they behave. That so I think that's one.
You said before you treat your body like an athlete or an Olympian. What does the Sami Inkinen diet look like?
There's three things you don't. It's kind of the rules of Fight Club. You don't talk about in America: politics, religion, and diets. If you want to make friends, politics, religion, diets. I'm very hesitant to talk about that. Here's kind of how I eat. I eat when I'm hungry, so that's number one thing. 2, I try to eat as much as real food. And if you're wondering, is something real food? It probably isn't, because you know what real food is. And then the third one is, outside of exercise, there's practically no sugar or processed carbohydrates. So that's kind of the three things. I eat when I'm hungry, not at set times. Mostly, whenever I can, just real food. And then thirdly, no sugar, and you don't really find sort of obvious carbohydrates in my diet.
The best founders do not need their VCs. Agree or disagree?
It's false, and here's why. The best founders recognize that this bundle, what VCs often deliver, is a bundle of three things: capital, advice, and for better or worse, on the board, governance. Capital, advice, governance often is a bundle, and you can't unbundle it. The best founders consciously choose a bundle that is very helpful for them, even if they are capable of doing anything else, and they want to make most out of it, rather than just say, I'm just going to take the money. Because you usually get the bundle for free, so you choose carefully. So that's why I say false.
What are the biggest mistakes you see other founders make in fundraising? It could be size, it could be valuation, it could be wrong investor, it could be whatever that may be.
They make it too transactional. By the way, I do a lot of angel invest in this because you really, it's easier to get rid of your co-founder than your VC and on the board. So too transactional. And I'll give you an example. And this is sort of a silly example, but as an angel investor, I don't know, maybe Y Combinator, somebody teaches people this. Like I get these emails like, oh, I'd so love to have you on a cap table. So-and-so name is already there. There's no space, absolutely, but I can just make space for you. And but unfortunately, I need your answer by 4 p.m. today. And it sounds like maybe ChatGPT gives this template where, you know, they give a famous name, sense of urgency, and then this is a special thing for you. Ridiculously transactional. And it turns me off so bad, even if I wanted to help the founder and even if I wanted to help the company. So I think one is just making it too transactional.
Can I ask you for some advice? So I met this founder earlier this week. My partner was like, hey, we've got to meet him. It's a super hot deal. And it's like 5 on 25. I mean, 5 on 25. I was like, bleh. But I was like, okay, fine. First 5 minutes, he's like, listen, love 20 VC, but we need to decide by the end of the week. And I'm like, great, thank you so much, and cool, is basically what I'm thinking bluntly. It's a 10-year relationship and I need to decide in 2 days, having never met you. Am I right? Or do you say, Harry, as a founder, suck it up, you need to move fast and make decisions?
So the truth is somewhere in the middle. As a principle and a foundational principle, I do think that, it's a long-term relationship. It's a very long-term relationship. And drawing the line, I'm like, okay, well, if that's what you want, like, sorry, we won't do it. And by the way, I think, the 2021 and maybe 22, a little bit 2020, I think there were a lot of people who were like, oh, we should have done some DD and take the time to get to know the founder and their morals and ethics and backgrounds and fraud, backgrounds and so forth.
Okay, Sami, final one for you. 10 years time, where's Sami Inkinen then, and where's Virta then?
For context, I think what we are trying to do, which is really addressing obesity and type 2 diabetes by actually making people healthy, unlike wonderful companies like Novo Nordisk that are selling drugs to treat the symptoms of diabetes and obesity. I think this journey of helping potentially billion plus people restore their metabolic health by addressing obesity and diabetes, that's like a 30 plus year journey or more. Like, I don't think this work is ever done. So I think we are somewhere on that trajectory. Hopefully we are a global company. Hopefully we are a counterbalance to a company like Novo Nordisk that's selling drugs to treat symptoms of these diseases. Hopefully we are known as the lifestyle treatment version of Novo Nordisk that is addressing the root cause of type 2 diabetes and obesity, and sort of globally known as a company that's doing good. Hopefully we are there, and hopefully I'm still playing some kind of a key role in the company's growth and success. That's kind of how I'd like it to be.
Sami, you are a star. I've loved doing this. Thank you so much for joining me. I can't believe it's been 7 years, but you've been amazing.
Well, thank you, Harry. Very much enjoyed it, and hopefully we can have the next one in less than 7 years.